Taylor Walker from the Adelaide Crows, and you're listening to the Coaches Panel.
Shannon Hearn from the West Coast Eagles.
This is Nathan Jones from the Melbourne Football Club.
Phil Davis from the GWS Giants.
It's Brad Avery from the Port Adelaide Football Club, and you're listening to the Coaches Panel.
Hello, you with MJ, and welcome to another of the 50 most relevant podcasts. Today, we venture into the 20s for our first time this year, and at number 29, it's Moses himself of the AFL. I'm talking about Kade Simpson, the Blues veteran. And you know what? I like getting guys on from the panel and friends of the coaches panel that go for teams of these teams, because I feel like you get a completely unbiased opinion. Said no one ever. Joining me on the line to talk all things Kade Simpson, I got the Rainman. Hello, mate. How are you?
Yeah, going well, MJ. I am a big fan of Simmo, and I think it's really apt that last year the Simpsons TV show celebrated their 30th year anniversary, and I think Kade Simpson did too.
He's pretty close to it, 30 years at AFL. Look, you know, he is reliable, he is consistent, he is durable, and this dude just keeps finding a way to get it done. Even at 34, he's given us one of his best fantasy football seasons from last year. A 131 in AFL fantasy was his top score for the year against West Coast. And then Supercoach, against a team he may or may not play in round one this year. Richmond, his best scorer of the year, 150. For his average, 95.2 in AFL Fantasy and Dream Team, and a huge 105 in Supercoach. He is not going to come cheap for you in 2019, but it's money worth spending, that is for sure. 570,300 in Supercoach, just a couple of $1,000 off 700,000 in Fantasy, and $682,200 in Dream Team. When you look at Kade Simpson and his fantasy career, you could just keep saying he finds a way to get it done. Year after year after year after year, he finds a way to get it done, doesn't he, Rainman? He seems to be one of the safest 90-plus defenders that we've had, not just for the past few years, but even as we venture into 2019.
Yeah, spot on, MJ. He just finds a way, and, you know, I think for the last 3 or 4 years, we've been waiting for him to drop, and many coaches have been burnt because he hasn't.
Yeah, we keep looking for it. We go, okay, he's into his 30s. It's going to happen. But you look at last year, he increased his Supercoach average off what was already pretty solid in the end of 2017, a 93.9. He bumped that up 12 points per game up to a 105. The year before that, it was a 106. So he and Supercoach, you have got to go back to the year 2008 for the last time that he did not average over 90. Just looking into the numbers last year for AFL Fantasy and Dream Team coaches, 10 tons, 8 of them over 110. For Supercoach, 10 tons again, but only one of them was under 110. So not only is he durable, not only does he have a pretty decent fantasy basement, he's got a ceiling that many fantasy defenders struggle to keep up with.
Yeah, I think that's bang on. You've talked about his reliability. He's missed 6 games in 13 years.
Yeah.
That's, you know, I don't even know what to say about that. I think the best thing that happened to Simmo this year was really unfortunate for fantasy coaches was Sam Doherty going down again.
Yeah.
Because what we actually saw is, you just talked about his numbers last year. That was on the back of no Sam Doherty.
Yeah.
And if you look at the comparison between 2017 and 2018, his 2018 was significantly better across all formats. The Blues are going to need him. The Blues are going to struggle. The Blues are going to get lots of goals kicked on. The ball's going to be in defence a lot. They need a cool hand Luke in the back line, and Kade's the man.
Yeah, well, that's the fascinating thing, isn't it? As crazy as it is to say about a 34-year-old for a team that's developing a group of youngsters, there is fundamental that need for him not just to be the cool head, but to give wisdom, to keep educating these young, both key defenders, but also how they structure up the systems, the way they play the game. He's very much that on-field coach as well as the, defensive six general for the side. He's probably still the best user of the ball by foot inside that defensive 50 unit, and he's going to be so keenly relied upon to be able to get them out of trouble time and time again. And as much as Carlton fans can be, buoyant about, some of the recruits they've had in their side and some of the draft selections over the past couple of years. And yeah, you'd probably say that things are starting to turn, but it's probably a slower turn, Rainman, than probably most Carlton fans would probably like. But at least you can feel like there's some light at the end of the tunnel with the midfield group and the talls that they're building.
Absolutely. And I think it's really relevant you talk about how he's a good user of the ball. His disposal efficiency is at 76%, which is, you know, if you look at defenders generally have good disposal efficiency, but anyone above that, apart from the ex-Carlton Zach Tui, are tall defenders who get a little bit of the ball. Kade Simpson's running at 76% disposal efficiency with around 25 disposals a game. You know, and I think the important thing about him is he doesn't have a limited score build. He builds his score in a variety of areas. He actually has the most intercept possessions at Carlton as well. Yeah. So not only is he running off, is he coming off the wing, his metres gained, 473 metres gained on average last year, which is just phenomenal. So he's intercepting, he's taking the kick-ins, he's getting that ball, he's running up the wing, he's pumping long, and he's doing it aged 103.
He just finds a way to keep getting it done, doesn't he? And then you probably add on top of that, it's been something that really up until there was confirmation from champion data, I intentionally didn't talk about what impact the kick-in rule would or wouldn't have. It would kind of, in one regards, make some players that we were speculating on and some of these commentary about them almost null and void until we knew. At least we knew, you know, with the no hands at the back rule or the 6-6-6 format, we could at least speculate. But now that we have confirmation from champion data that any possession by foot once a player is outside of the goal square, that counts as a disposal. Anytime you handball the ball as a defender after a behind, even if you're inside the square, it counts as a traditional handball. What is good news for Kade Simpson owners and potentially others, and we'll no doubt do plenty of episodes and content about this here at the Coaches Panel, is last year he led the Carlton Football Club. Around about 35-36% of the kick-outs of Carlton were handled by Kade Simpson, and half of those he played on. So he's not going to get a super crazy points jump from that, but he is certainly going to, like I think a lot of defenders that do be the first point out, you know, of a behind, they're going to get some form of a points bump. Whether he chooses to run the ball out and then dispose by hand or foot, I still think there's even potential growth on Kade Simpson.
Yeah, I agree, and I think he has both strings to his bow as well, MJ. He can do that, but he can also play that chip out, get the ball back, which we know he's a master of the +6 as well. So I think it actually benefits him. I think he does get a slight score bump. I don't think it'll be as significant as some of the other players.
That's right.
But the good thing about him as well is we start to talk around who are the number one defenders this year, and the same names crop up. It's probably the big three. It's Laird, it's Lloyd, and it's Lockie, the three L's. Nobody's talking about Kade, because then, you know, the other guys that are getting talked about are your Witherdens, your Blakeleys, and your Sicilies. Yeah. And probably a sprinkling of others. And poor old man Kade Simpson doesn't even get thought of. But if you look at his numbers, he averaged his percentage of hundreds. He ran at 48% of every game of his game to hundreds. That's the same as Jake Lloyd. Yeah. We don't think about that, right? We think about Lloyd and the ceiling that he has. But old Mr. Consistency just gets it done. And if you're looking for a point of difference, he's a good place to get it, because everyone's going to go vanilla in the back line, is my feel.
100%. You know, someone is going to have Lloyd or Laird, one of those two, if not both. No matter the format you play, even if you're looking for value in an AFL fantasy backline, you're going to need an anchor to kind of build your side around through there. Yep, Sicily's going to be hugely popular, and understandably so. Lockie, there's an episode that was just done a few days ago with myself and Ben as we talked about Zach Williams in the 50 most relevant. While I still think Lockie's going to be one of the best defenders, there is some question marks about what impact will happen as I believe he moves up the ground, back onto the wing, and maybe not so much a part of the defensive unit. Still be a top 6, top 10 defender, but maybe not pick up some of the bump of these new rules that guys that do the kick out will be. I think when you start looking for reasons not to select Kade Simpson, it feels like a really weak list. Sometimes you can build a really compelling case with stats and data and information, and you go, yeah, it's really easy why I'm not going to start Kade Simpson. The only reason you're not choosing to look at Kade either as a starting squad or an upgrade target is purely because you're ranking guys like a Lloyd and a Laird higher, and then maybe you're just sprinkling it with some of the mid-price defenders and stepping stones that we've spoken about already in the 50, like a Robertson, like a Brodie Smith, like maybe a Pierce Hanley if you get his body right. Because there's not really a justifiable reason that makes sense. He's still inside their best 22 players comfortably. He's shown even in his mid-30s, he's not declining anytime soon, such as his preparation. There's no obvious sign of decline because he's bumped his scores up last year. And Carlton's not the kind of club and Simmo's not the kind of player. I'm keen on your thoughts on this as a Carlton supporter. I don't feel like, even though the club is rebuilding, that they're going to tell one of the most valued faithful players that they've had, during a difficult season of the club's history to say, mate, we want you to retire so we can play the kids midway through the year. I don't see that happening.
No, I completely agree. He's the heart and soul of the club, MJ. You talk around, he's in their best 22. There's Paddy Cripps, and then Kade Simpson makes up the other 21 players. It's really that simple. And, I think he's the on-field leader. They've got a young list. They've got a young back line that is starting to develop. He's the general out of there, and they're not going to change that. That's why they've got some of these young guys, whether it be a Newman or a Williamson or a Lockie O'Brien or even a Marchbank, starting to control that back line. They're learning off Kade.
Yes.
So as much exposure as he's got out on the field, watching and learning off him is what they need to do.
Yeah, look, the probably the only, like we've talked about, the main reason you're choosing to pass on him until after his bye, if at all, is the people he shares the bye round with is Rory Laird from Adelaide and Lockie Whitfield from GWS. Gold Coast, probably the most relevant defender there. And again, it's if he can get his body right, would be a Pierce Hanley. From a Richmond perspective, probably a Jaden Short, maybe Alex Rance for Supercoach. Depending on how clubs choose to structure their way and navigate their way through potentially, some defensive structures, maybe Brandon Ellis can kind of chunk up a bit of the ball with transition footy. For North Melbourne, maybe it's a Luke McDonald, but there's too many question marks to seriously entertain them outside of a draft. So the only reason you're probably not starting Simpson is for your buy structure, rightly or wrongly. You think Whitfield, Laird and Simpson may be too heavy to start off with, which I don't think it is, by the way.
Yeah, and I think starting is a really relevant lead-in as well, MJ. As we know, the blockbuster round one has been for the last 5 or so years, Richmond-Carlton. Now, Kade loves those games. His last 5 scores in the first game of the year, this is Dream Team read, 129, 126, 118, 97 and 96. And on the top of that, they always play at the MCG. Kade loves the space there. Across the last 3 years, has only ever gone under 80 twice at the MCG. Yeah. Wow. So for me, I think if you're thinking Kade, you've got to back yourself in and you start him.
Yeah, I think absolutely true. And the fact that he will be unique is a massive thing for you, because you don't just want to get a guy that's unique for the heck of it. It's got to be, I believe he's got the capacity to match, if not outscore, others that are more well-owned. And Simmo's got that potential. And then you throw in the fact that he will never be tagged. Whereas you can't say that about Lockie. You can't say that about Sicily. You can't say that about Laird. But you can comfortably say that about Simpson. Sides will not be shutting down Kade Simpson. They will have their hands full with Patrick Cripps, that they won't even be thinking about a defensive tag on Kade Simpson, because the ball's going to be spending so much time inside, unfortunately for Carlton fans, still so much time inside that defensive 50 for them. It's not going to save them a game by tagging Kade Simpson. Yeah,
exactly right. The teams aren't going to win a game by tagging Kade Simpson.
No, you're not.
They're going to win a game, unfortunately, because they're playing Carlton.
Yeah.
So that means he's the perfect fantasy player as far as I'm concerned.
Yep. All ticks in my book. I like it. Whether you choose to start him or upgrade him is maybe a matter of personal preference, and that's fine. But he must be in serious consideration. And if you need something different in your side, Simmo is the guy across every single format. Let's talk drafts. Where does he go? because we've alluded to a couple of days ago, I believe we were talking about Josh Dunkley when it comes to drafts, while they're different players. You alluded to the fact that maybe defenders this year are going to get a bit more of a bump because of these new rules, where those that take the kick in now have access to a disposal, potentially, that is now going to count to their fantasy score that probably wasn't previously. How early do we go with him? Because he is probably going to go as a defensive one position.
Yeah, I think he slides MJ. I think the popular people we've talked about all across this podcast, the big three, plus the Withertons, the Blakeleys, the Sicilies, and potentially with the rule changes, someone like a Shannon Hearn comes in contention. And I think people are going to react on those rule changes really early without actually considering it. So I think he can slide a fair bit. If you land him as D2,
wow,
well done you.
Yeah.
But I think there is potential, because I think the load up is on those big defenders early. People will then start to move on, third and fourth midfielders and potentially a forward. He could go, fifth or sixth round. Wow. You could be picking up a Kade Simpson. That may not happen, but it absolutely could.
Yeah, and you're right. Every draft is unique. The amount of players on side is unique. The scoring formats are unique, and some just don't strategize and keep a fluid strategy in the midst of a draft. They start to see Devon and Menegola and Heaney and Dunkley and Danger run off the board, and they're like, oh, crap, I'm running out of forwards. I better go and get myself a Toby Green and lock in and jump in way earlier than they should, and they're missing a very likely 100 defender candidate. Yeah,
I think you're completely right there, and I think it's an interesting one for a keepers league because he is 105 years old. It really depends on where you are, because he still has this year, and I think possibly next year in him.
Wow.
And next year he probably eases back a little bit, and they start to transition him out, and he becomes more of that assistant coachy kind of, think of a Luke Hodge kind of role. But I think if you're in contention and he's available, just risk it for the biscuit and have a flutter on him. Trade away not too much to get him back, but he could really be the difference between you finishing fourth or taking out your league this year.
Yeah, and conversely, if you're not in contention and you own Kade Simpson, hold him. Hold him, make him sweat, because I can't see the drop-off coming. I can't see the slowdown coming. And as coaches get more and more in contention, 100 defenders, you might be able to jag someone that's going to play for your keeper league side for the next 8 to 10 years and be a gun, and you're giving away a guy that may only have 5 to 25 games of footy left in him.
Agreed.
I like Kade Simpson. That is for short. Maybe he's too low in your view. Maybe you're like, no, he's not even in the top 6. Love to get your thoughts. You can have your thoughts across all of the social media channels of the Coaches Panel at Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Hey, Rob, Rainman, Rainbird, the legend, we appreciate your thoughts today, chatting Kade Simpson.
Always happy to chat a blue.
I thought you might be, that is for sure. I wonder if there's any more blues coming up in the 50 most relevant. If you want to go and check back the players that have been revealed so far, they're at coachespanel.tv. The articles are there, and you can go and check the corresponding podcast via however you're consuming this podcast episode right now. You can support the Coaches Panel by leaving a 5-star review, however you're getting podcasts, as well as pledge and join our Patreon. Get some exclusive content and early access to these 50 most relevant podcasts. Getting close to the halfway marker, and there are still plenty more surprises of who does and doesn't make my 50 most relevant.